There are seasons when a voice grows softer without anyone announcing it. Welcome back to T-Sequence Narratives. Some people quietly follow these stories. This one lingers in the space that forms when someone decides to speak less and begins to notice what remains. The year I went quiet did not begin with a decision, it began with a small pause. At first, it was just a skipped reply, a message left sitting for a few hours longer than usual, a call allowed to pass without being returned immediately. I told myself I was busy. I told myself I would answer later. Later stretched. Conversations that once felt effortless started to feel rehearsed. I would type a response, delete it, type another, then close the screen instead. In group settings, I listened more than I contributed. I noticed how easily others filled the air, how naturally stories layered over each other without waiting for space. No one mentioned my quiet at first. Silence rarely alarms people when it arrives gradually. There had been a time when I narrated everything, small inconveniences, minor victories, the details of my day offered up like proof that I was present, that I was participating, that I mattered in the ongoing exchange of words. But something shifted. It was not anger, it was not sadness exactly. It was more like fatigue, a tiredness of explaining myself, a tiredness of clarifying tone, a tiredness of offering pieces of my interior world only to feel them dissolve on contact. So I began to conserve. I spoke when necessary, I answered direct questions, I fulfilled obligations. But the extra commentary, the stitching that holds relationships together, slowly unraveled. At work, I became efficient and unremarkable. Meetings passed with my camera off, my microphone muted unless called upon. I completed assignments, met deadlines, received neutral feedback. I was described as steady. Steady is another word for quiet. Friends adjusted in subtle ways. Some filled the silence on my behalf, others stopped reaching out as often. Invitations became less frequent, though never entirely absent. When I did attend gatherings, I stayed near the edges. I listened to laughter rise and fall like distant waves. There is a certain power in saying less. People project into the space you leave behind. They assume reasons. They create narratives. They attribute depth where there may only be stillness. I noticed how often I had once spoken to prevent misunderstanding, to smooth discomfort, to maintain warmth. Without those efforts, interactions felt cooler, simpler, more honest in their restraint. The year unfolded in small, unremarkable increments. Seasons changed, holidays passed, birthdays were acknowledged with brief messages instead of long phone calls. I kept my responses measured, polite, light. Inside, there was more observation than expression. I paid attention to the way conversations shifted when I didn't rush to reassure, the way certain people leaned closer, trying to read what I was not saying, the way others seemed relieved by my reduced presence. Silence can reveal preference. In quiet rooms, I heard my own thoughts more clearly. They were not dramatic. They did not demand action. They simply existed, uninterrupted. I began waking earlier before the rest of the world felt fully awake. In those hours, I would sit with coffee cooling in my hands, watching light gather along the walls. There was no one to narrate the moment to, no audience, just the steady rhythm of breath and the faint hum of appliances. The absence of commentary felt unfamiliar at first. Then it felt natural. I realized how much of my previous noise had been an attempt to maintain connection, to ensure continuity, to prevent distance from widening. But distance widens quietly, whether spoken about or not. Midway through the year, someone asked if I was all right. The question was gentle, almost casual. We were standing near a doorway, coats half on, preparing to leave. Their tone held curiosity more than concern. "I've just been keeping to myself," I said. It was true, and it was not the full truth. Keeping to myself meant I had stopped volunteering explanations. It meant I no longer filled gaps with apologies. It meant I allowed pauses to remain pauses. There is a subtle discomfort in extended silence. Most people rush to end it. I let it stretch. I watched how quickly others reached for distraction, how often they misinterpreted quiet as disapproval, or boredom, or hidden resentment. Rarely did anyone consider quiet might simply be preference. I wasn't withdrawing from life, I was reducing commentary. During that year, I wrote more than I spoke, not publicly, not for anyone else, just pages of observations, folded and tucked away, thoughts about small interactions, about patterns I had missed before, about the tone of certain conversations once stripped of my constant affirmations. Without my steady stream of agreement, some dynamics faltered. I noticed who needed validation to continue speaking, who thrived regardless, who turned toward me with patience, who turned away. None of it felt dramatic. There were no confrontations, no declarations, just a gradual recalibration of presence. Silence altered my sense of time. Moments stretched longer. I became aware of background sounds, like the ticking of a clock, the faint buzz of traffic outside, the soft rustle of fabric when someone shifted in their seat. These details had always existed. I had simply been speaking over them. Toward the end of summer, I declined an invitation without offering an elaborate reason. I typed a short message. "I won't be able to make it tonight. I hope it goes well." There was no follow-up question. The simplicity surprised me. For years, I had believed my participation was essential to maintaining connection, that without my steady involvement, threads would unravel entirely. Instead, they adjusted. Some grew thinner, some disappeared quietly, a few strengthened, perhaps because they did not rely on constant reinforcement. The year I went quiet did not transform me into someone new. It revealed what remained when words were no longer used to cushion every interaction. I became more selective with what I shared, not secretive, just intentional. I stopped narrating discomfort in real time. I stopped explaining my moods before anyone asked. There is a particular vulnerability in constant openness, a subtle exposure that accumulates over time. Stepping back felt like pulling a curtain half closed, not to hide, but to soften the light. Autumn arrived with cooler air and earlier sunsets. I found myself walking longer routes home, listening to leaves scrape across pavement. I did not feel lonely, I felt contained. Contained is different from isolation. People still spoke to me, I still answered, I still laughed when something was genuinely amusing, but the volume of my presence had lowered. Occasionally, someone would say, "You're so quiet lately." I would nod. The comment held neither praise nor criticism, just acknowledgement. In quieter spaces, I became aware of how often I had once shaped conversations to maintain harmony, how frequently I absorbed tension to prevent discomfort from surfacing. Silence refused that role. Without my immediate reassurance, others had to navigate their own uncertainty. Some did so gracefully, others seemed unsettled. I learned to sit with that unsettled feeling. By winter, my quiet felt less like an experiment and more like a default. I spoke when something felt necessary, when a thought carried weight, when a question deserved more than a nod. The rest of the time, I allowed space. There is something steady about reduced speech. It narrows focus, it clarifies intention, it limits the impulse to react impulsively. I found that when I did speak, people listened more closely, not because my words were profound, but because they were fewer. Scarcity changes perception. The year ended without ceremony, No announcement marked the close of my quiet season, no resolution restored my previous volume. Life simply continued. Looking back, I cannot point to a single event that required silence. There was no dramatic turning point, only an accumulation of small moments that suggested fewer words might be enough. The quiet did not solve anything. It did not mend every misunderstanding. It did not strengthen every connection. But it shifted my awareness. I understood how much of my earlier presence had been driven by fear of being forgotten, how much effort had gone into ensuring I was seen, heard, acknowledged. In quiet, I discovered that being less visible did not erase me. It simply altered the shape of my participation. As another year approached, I did not suddenly return to my former self. I did not make a promise to speak more or less. I carried forward the memory of that reduced volume, the understanding that silence can hold as much meaning as speech, even when no one interprets it correctly. Some relationships remained exactly as they were. Others softened at the edges. A few faded into polite distance. I did not chase them. There's a stillness that settles when you stop trying to fill every gap. The year I went quiet became less about absence and more about restraint. Restraint of commentary, of explanation, of unnecessary elaboration. In the quiet, I heard the cadence of my own thoughts without interruption. I noticed the weight of words before releasing them. I understood that not every observation requires expression. Silence did not isolate me. It clarified who was comfortable standing beside it. And when the year ended, nothing dramatic shifted. There was no return to noise, just a steady continuation, with space left intentionally between sentences. Some seasons close gently, leaving only a quieter version of the same room. You've been listening to T-Sequence Narratives. Some moments don't end. They just stop being spoken about.